All right, we are live here this morning. Good morning to those who are tuning in, and this is a live edition of the New Warehouse podcast. So, thank you for joining, and we are happy to be live this morning. We're going to be joined by Mark Ang. He is the co-founder and CEO of GoBolt, and we're going to talk a little bit about the GoBolt story today. We're going to learn about how they have built out and how Mark has kind of built out this company, this 3PL, along with EV delivery vehicles. I've seen around at some of the conferences, seen online. We've had GoBolt mentioned on previous podcasts too, specifically with our friends at Two Boxes as well. I've mentioned them as a big time partner. So we're going to dive into that, and we're also going to hear a little bit from him about what's happening in the market right now, what he's seeing, and some of the relationship I'm interested to dive into too around the sustainability aspect that they have a big focus on, and how that may be impacted a little bit from some of the scramble of the tariff uncertainty that's going on. So Mark, welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Yeah, very good, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Doing well, and looking forward to our chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I feel like we should have gotten you on the podcast a lot sooner. I think we're floating around in some of the similar circles, and I'm happy we could finally cross those paths. So tell us, I guess, first, for people maybe that are not familiar with GoBolt, just give us a brief overview. What is GoBolt?
Yeah, well, it was bound to happen if we're flying in the same circles. This was just a matter of time, and at least there's more to talk about now than there was, a few years ago. So GoBolt is a end-to-end fulfillment provider that stores, picks, packs, and ships product. We also have a growing fleet that's increasingly electric. So in markets where we operate parcel delivery and you happen to warehouse your product there, or we zone skip, we will also do that end-to-end delivery. So it keeps it all in the same network, which provides a ton of advantages to the brands that we work with and their shoppers. So at the core, we're a 3PL plus a delivery business, layering on our own proprietary tech. And we've been doing this since 2019. Business technically started in 2017, but we did a pretty big pivot in 2019.
2019, interesting time, right? To be in this business for sure. Yeah. So I guess tell us a little bit about that, because it's certainly a bit unique in the sense that you're doing the fulfillment, but then also that kind of last mile as well, as you mentioned there. So tell us a little bit about kind of where the idea for GoBolt came from, and how you decided that, like, okay, this is what I want to do right now.
Yeah, my first brush with e-com was running my own Shopify store back in 2013, 2014. I built and sold watches. This is when you could actually start a micro brand watch company profitably.
Okay.
And I was, at the time in university, I had to sort of like pay my own way. And I turned to various startups, and this is one of the ones that stuck and got some traction. So I got experience with a 3PL down in California at that point in time. I was based in Toronto, Canada, the 51st state, as some refer to us. And ultimately grew that business and put it on pause just because like the inventory investment was just like too much. But that's when I sort of like got to appreciate what goes into running a warehouse and 3PL operations. Park that idea for a second. Finishing up my final semester of university, and I look around, and all my international student friends are going to be spending $90 to store a box for the summer. And if you think about like the content of a dorm room, you might have like 10 boxes to 15 boxes. That's like 900 plus bucks for the summer just to store your stuff and then get it back. And I thought, hey, I could probably come up with something that's like better, faster, cheaper. And so my thought was, let me do it for a third of the price and make it 3 times more convenient. And I decided to partner with a 3PL that was a file storage company. And we launched into the student market and offered summer storage for students. And, we did this by like breaking into dorm buildings, sliding business cards under dorm room doors, putting flyers in front of
I like
urinals and
that. I like that.
inside of bathroom stalls. So I had a very captive audience, and we were able to grow to like 20,000 a month of revenue, like basically in 2 weeks. And
Oh
my
wow.
co-founder Heinrich and I were like, holy shit, this was like way more than we had thought. This is probably not a side hustle anymore. It's probably a main hustle. And of course, on the busiest day, our 3PL drops us. They're like, hey, our team's burnt out. You guys have grown way too quickly.
Oh.
You're on your own. Sorry. Good luck. And if you need to drop things off at our warehouse, like you're more than welcome to, but our drivers aren't doing any of the pickups.
Mm.
So like, holy shit. April 28th, my final exam's that morning. Heinrich's already in his final exam. And we just go rent a U-Haul and do all the pickups until 4 a.m. And we said, okay, if we're going to do this business, we have to do it ourselves. And we started to build our own infrastructure and do it ourselves. Now, this is a very long-winded story because it goes into why we do warehousing, pick, pack, and delivery. So this is 2017. We, had this explosive growth early days. We raised a 500K kind of pre-seed round, scaled the business. 2019, companies have started to like use us unbeknownst to us. They were going onto our portal, storing stuff, having us deliver in the GTA. And we're like, these are like increasingly our power users. They're like 5% of our revenue with like a rounding error number of accounts. And it started to kind of grow, and we decided to hire a sales team of one and go after that market more deliberately. And before we knew it, we were doing, end-to-end storage and delivery locally in Toronto and Vancouver. Okay. And so we just decided to pause the consumer stuff at a certain point in time and just went super deep into B2B. And this thing called COVID hit, and we were really well positioned to serve and deliver. And fortunately, there's a lot of things in our history that, have led to us being here. When we hit COVID, all the storage we had for consumers just sat there. And so we had this recurring revenue base that let us really build and innovate for our business clients. And then we had all this fleet and driver capacity that we could parlay into, doing deliveries. And furniture delivery really blew up at the beginning of COVID when people wanted to decorate their house. Like your background right now, Kev, if like back in the day, it might have been bare, but now you're like, okay, I'm on camera. I need to like represent myself. Like, let me get some cool t-shirt. Let me get some like my favorite drinks up here. Like, but back in the day, that would have been empty. And so people just started to populate their house with all these different knickknacks, and fulfillment blew up and delivery blew up, and we were kind of well positioned to ride the wave.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that's so interesting about the dorm room storage, because I remember when I was a student, right? And I was thinking like, because, there's a lot of stuff that people either they have to like trek back and forth, right? Which I'm sure you saw. Or the other thing that I saw too was that a lot of people would just like throw stuff out, right?
Yeah.
Like, like
wild.
I would like wait to like the last day, and I would go around the trash room, and like I still have a mini fridge that I rescued from a trash room in my basement, actually, and working still. Like now, I guess what is I'm gonna date myself here. I'm like 13, 14 years out from college, but yeah, and I mean it's pretty incredible, right? I mean this stuff there, and it's great that you were able to recognize that opportunity. And really, by by getting kind of like kicked out, right, by this 3PL that was helping you out, or ending their services with you. I mean, really pushed you to where you are now, which I think is incredible. And obviously, as you said, poised in 2019 going into the pandemic, unbeknowingly, right? I mean, certainly is a great spur for you to kind of grow and take advantage of what was going on during that time. So very interesting. And I'm curious, as you went into that, I mean, you said that, there was an opportunity because you were doing storage, right? And then people were looking to do more things in their house. And, that was definitely something you could leverage. But what were some of the challenges there at that point? I mean, did you see any challenges for yourself in the business, saying like, oh no, like we just like went in on this in 2019. Now all of a sudden everybody's shutting down. What's going on? Like, how are we going to handle this? Like, were there challenges, or was it just kind of like opportunity?
Yeah, we tend to make decisions with high conviction. So we got to the place of turning off new pickups for consumers within like days, not even weeks.
Mm.
Because our position was, if this isn't like our passion anymore, we're not going to do it well. So let's like park this idea. Let's still obviously provide the storage service that we've committed to, because the nature of storage is pretty long term and sleepy. And so there was no need to disrupt all of our customers that were already in storage. And then we'd have the benefit of sort of doing this like reverse integration, where as our consumers wound down and alleviated space, we could then grow and bring in business clients. And that's exactly sort of how it unfolded. We at this point had, I think, 4 or 5 warehouses across the country for our consumer business, and we were now winding up on the B2B and last mile side as we were winding down on the consumers. Still to this day, we have consumers in storage that we cannot get rid of. They like refuse to remove their stuff. They're like, it's staying there. The deal's great, and we love. We just want to keep our storage here. And so, you actually cannot fire these customers, even if you wanted to. And so, there wasn't really like this oh shit moment when the pandemic hit. What like you actually start to think through is like, okay, wait, we have like hundreds of associates. We need to like track and trace different people. Like if they have a COVID encounter at home, we need to like trace them through our cameras to figure out who they talk to, like who they might have come in close proximity with. Like we had to come up with models to like schedule our fleet team that would actually do deliveries, because you're in a small truck cabin all day. And if someone got COVID, almost certainly the next person would too. And so there's just like a lot of like communication, crisis management, like turn on a dime type stuff that, when you operate a warehouse, you can like demarc different areas and like have like, 5S and, tape off like big areas to kind of avoid collisions. Doing delivery, going into homes, like there was a whole nother level of complexity. And so I think it just got us to be galvanized quickly. And like anyone who has worked in logistics knows that it's sort of like, how quickly can you solve a problem at the core and then move on to the next thing, versus like just be on this hamster wheel of problems. And so we just got, I think, really good at doing that. And I think we carry a lot of those principles forward today, like around communication, agility, resilience. Like I think the team has like really done well in those regards.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And I remember, I mean, I was a plant manager at that time too, and yeah, that was crazy trying to work, and because we were deemed critical at the time, and trying to manage the flow of employees in, and like you mentioned, the tracking and tracing when there was a case, and we did testing too, and putting up plexiglass in between packing stations. It was crazy times. But it really interesting. And so since obviously you've expanded right now, I mean, 2025, right? We're 6 years later from that 2019 pivot, right? So now tell us, because you've expanded beyond Toronto, right? I mean, where you have multiple locations now, where are you operating at?
Yeah. So we're in, 5 major cities in Canada. We're launching a 6th shortly. We're in 5 major ones in the US, specifically like New York, New Jersey, LA. We service San Diego from there now. We have Houston, Atlanta, Miami. And we're going to be opening up 3 more locations this year for our last mile parcel business, like kind of more expanding zones in a bigger way. And so the business has just like grown tremendously. Like when we first started, we were doing like warehousing, pick, pack for all size products, like sheet sets to like large furniture. But we were only doing delivery for large furniture because we had these like massive 26-foot trucks to do consumer pickups and movers, and they were well trained to do home delivery. We weren't delivering like your poly mailer on a 26-foot truck at the time. We ended up buying a company that got us into parcel. We always knew we wanted to. We thought buying that company would fast forward us technologically to get into that space. We've actually reverse integrated that entire company into our existing software stack and has just built on top of our software stack to make the parcel features that much more robust. We like acquired a small AI company that whose CEO is still with us and leads our development around AI and ML, and owns our routing algorithm team. So we just done a lot to get smarter. And all of that has let us become a very like financially resilient business because you can make a software change and all
Yeah.
of a sudden your route efficiency can increase by 10%. You can, think about zoning, wave times. You can start to take in like driver behavior attributes, and you can improve quality and cost at the same time. And so I think that's been like the big thing. Like there was a period of time where we slowed investment in tech, and we are very much ramped up and way more
Mm.
aggressive than before. And it's paying dividends, but it's one of those things you have to kind of stick with
Yeah.
because it's like not short-term wins usually on the software side.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting to hear how you've embraced that technology. I was looking. I saw. I think you had posted or GoBolt had posted about your like AI POD
Yeah.
thing, which I thought was pretty cool. But tell us a little bit about kind of since 2019 when you really like started to focus on this part of the business. I mean, tell us about kind of the evolution of the industry in general and be interested to hear kind of specifically around the tech side, like how did that look in 2019 versus like what you're doing and focused on now.
Yeah. The version numbers on our tech have increased dramatically. Like, I actually don't even know what separates V7.8.772 from like the next one, but the version numbers and the releases have grown. And the team
Yeah.
is the Heinrich does an amazing job. The product team is exceptional, and our engineers are great and have been very long standing with us. And they build like really practical software. Like they're at our warehouse on Wednesdays. They're like involved with the team. They're chatting
Mm,
with their frontline team members. They're doing pick pads. They're packing out. They're transferring product. They're doing delivery runs. Like very much in the business. Partly because that's how we started. Like Hendrik and I were like, shoulder to shoulder in the trenches, slugging boxes, palletizing, putting them in rack, staging orders. And it's because we did those things that we were able to have like nuggets of information to bring to a boardroom later on how we would now make decisions and navigate. And
mm,
so it's funny that when you grow, you're like, I want to grow out of that. And I'm like, no, fuck. How do we grow into that and figure out ways to scale that level of insight? Because that's the magic. You can create these small pockets of innovation where people like own a problem and then they own the outcome development. So I think like that has like stayed very much the same inside of GoBolt. What I've seen in the market, just broadly, 2019 sort of like logistics was still like unsexy.
mm,
2020 hits, it's like, okay, wait, all these things went to zero, a lot of software spend pulled back. And then things kind of like came back and a tidal wave effects kind of washed out and then it came and hit. And one of the spaces that got a lot of interest was supply chain because there was tons of disruption. And so a lot of like problem solvers were like, how do we solve this? And what it, I think, drew was a lot of SaaS, typically SaaS founders and
mm.
SaaS oriented folks into like an industry now that had a lot of atoms. So like they dealt with bits, now they're dealing with bits and atoms, and that's a different problem set. What motivates someone who is earning $20 an hour and just wants a stable job, treated fairly, good benefits, they don't need like a 4-day work week. They don't need like XYZ on top of that. It's actually
Mm.
much simpler, but you can kind of like boil the ocean a bit if you approach it in a way where you're trying to attract like really high caliber, high cost talent. And so what that did was I think it drove a lot of inflation in our space.
Mm.
Wages went through the roof.
Yeah.
Space was like gobbled up in massive quantities because typically when you're a small warehouse company, you start small and you layer on and you kind of like consolidate to a bigger site. When you have a ton of VC funding, you just go get the biggest site that you're going to grow into. You don't really
Yeah.
calculate the vacancy cost, which is like could be in the tens of millions. And so like it drove inflation for space, it drove inflation for wages. I think it like obfuscated pricing models. Like I saw a lot of people offering like free storage or free this or free that. I'm like, there are like tangible costs to doing this with high quality.
Yeah.
And I think it like set the industry back a bit because it takes a while for those ripple effects to just nullify. And I think they are largely kind of unraveling now because a lot of those companies have unfortunately gone under. And so I think what we will see moving forward, Kevin, is a ton of consolidation and further kind of businesses closing their doors because those models aren't sustainable. There are some tried
Mm.
and true like motherhoods and apple pies in the space, um, and so I think that that's starting to come back to reality a little bit now. And it's been like 5 years. So it's just goes to show how long it takes to unravel
Yeah.
kind of behavior.
Yeah, definitely, and I love too that you guys were are out there on the floor, like doing the work in the beginning, and like you said, still on Wednesdays, like they're going out there and they're talking to the front lines and being on the floor. I think that makes such a difference because to your point, I did see this too, where there was like a lot of investment that came in, right? And it's like, oh, we're gonna do this from a tech forward approach, right,
Yeah.
or something like that, right? And but the people that were doing that type of thing, like they never really like had spent time on the floor or understood operations like that. Like it sounds like to the level that you invested in that time to do that, and still it sounds like as well, and that makes such a difference when it comes to logistics because I think you can add a ton of tech, right? You can layer on tech, right? And but still at its core, right? You still have to have those operational foundational functions in place and working properly, right?
Yeah, I mean, when the rubber meets the road, who's your customer? Like your customer is
Hmm.
not the next fundraise or the kind of current crop of investors that want a certain multiple. And no matter how much tech you develop, unless you're literally selling seats and licenses, you're not a SaaS business in logistics. You're a tech-enabled business that happens to build its own software. And unless that software gives you an edge, like it lets you merge warehouse and parcel or transportation operations better, which is what we desperately need. And there's not really a great software out there that does that, or go why we build our own.
Mm.
Um, there's not really a compelling story to justify like a 10x multiple, like what a software company would on average garner in the market. So your customer is a brand, their customer is the shopper. Like that is like P0. Like they need to be served, and what you build should make their life better. And
Mm.
so I think people like went away from that, and they kind of built really flashy things, and some of those things are super useful. I think have actually challenged the industry to be better. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of like sleepiness too. I think it before even we got the benefit of showing up when things were still on kind of on the rise. Um, but the industry has been challenged to be better, and I think there's a lot more focus on software now and investments in that in the space.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I love that perspective too, and how you've kind of seen that evolution over time there, and it's interesting to hear the investment that you've made in that, and I love how you said it's kind of something you gotta stick with, right, to see the dividends like over the long term, and I love that, and so tell us too now because you guys have a big focus on sustainability as well, right? So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that. Was that part of the mission originally, or is that something that came into the picture? And how has it been trying to like stay committed to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. When we first started the storage business, we were fully diesel. Partly because like you
Mm.
had these long routes, you had really heavy payloads, and frankly, EVs weren't a thing. Commercial EVs didn't exist at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
And so when we made this pivot, the reason we were pivoting was Hendrik and I didn't want to be like the guys known to help you hoard your stuff more efficiently at scale. Like that wasn't what we were like super excited about.
yeah.
And when we had this opportunity to sort of reinvent ourselves, which doesn't really happen that much at that scale, we wanted to do it in a way that we would be fully proud of, like from kind of soup to nuts. And one of the things that we looked at when we kind of ran the model on like what could this 3PL delivery business look like was that at scale we might have like tens of thousands of vehicles on the road,
Mm.
and we would be spending tens of millions of dollars a quarter on fuel. And from an emission, and just our curiosity got the better of us, and we started to kind of infer what that would mean from an environmental impact, and then went down the rabbit hole of, are commercial EVs even a thing yet? And we signed up to be guinea pigs with a number of businesses that were just getting started.
Mm.
And if I had a do-over, I think we would still do it, but like literally the level of nascency in the space was, we would turn left in this massive 26-foot truck and it would go right because the steering column is computerized and it was
Yeah.
wired incorrectly. So like,
Ooh.
like when someone gives you a PlayStation controller and it's inverted, you can't play.
Yeah.
Like you like your wiring's all messed up. So imagine that in a vehicle. Like first, it is obviously there's a huge safety issue, but there's it just speaks to how like early that space was. So we work with these businesses. We still work with some of them today, and they've grown, and we're proud of it. And what I always say is that it's not that we're like, you know, we started off on this mission to like, let's go save, the planet. And we wanted to do this with that like sole focus. Um, Environmental like consciousness and having EVs within our fleet is also just good business.
Mm.
If we went to the market and said, hey, pay a premium for sustainability, you would say, no, here's the door. And like, unit economics
Yeah.
matter. I have a budget. My CEO will feed me to the wolves if I spend $2 more per package on this. What we looked at it as an opportunity was like, how can we actually lower costs with sustainability in mind?
Mm.
Because that just makes it a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't you do it? Like, unless you were committed to emitting greenhouse gas emissions, and that was your optimization focus was like to increase
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. How
Of
do we
course, you would choose
maximize our
us,
carbon footprint? Yeah.
right? Like, if we were cheaper, like from a precision perspective, just as precise, if not better, and we lowered your emissions, no brainer. And EVs happen to obviously not consume any electricity or any fuel. They take 90% less cost in terms of the relative electricity charge. They're like 60% less maintenance cost. They're just like actually better to operate. The kicker is that they're way more expensive to buy, like 4 times more expensive. And so you need to actually keep these things on the road, and not having a vehicle on the road will kill your P&L. And there's a
Mm.
number of reasons why you might not have a vehicle on the road. There could be downtime due to maintenance, which, we structure our contracts to protect against that. But you could also not be able to operationalize the vehicle from a routing perspective. And
Mm.
so that's why building our own routing algorithm lets us factor in an EV attribute and the other million attributes that go into optimizing an EV route. So it wasn't like, hey, let's go like build an EV supply chain business. It was like, let's reinvent ourselves and do that in a way that we're proud of. This is one of those elements. And when you run it to ground, it's amazing for our customers and our merchants. We get so many 5-star reviews when people are like, wow, like this thing rolled up. It was like super quiet. It was clean.
Yeah.
It's got like nice branding. Our real-time truck tracker shows when it's an EV vehicle. We promote like the emissions that are being avoided as a result of it. Where we can't do an EV delivery, just to keep the ethos centered, we sequester carbon by planting trees, and we've now planted over 100,000 trees as a result.
Oh, nice.
And eventually that tree planting will go to zero because our fleet will be fully electric. So, we're at odds, but right now we're seeing that grow, and we're really proud of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome, and I love too that the approach, because I think there's for a long time there's like a narrative, right, that like, oh well, if I need to be more sustainable, like it's going to cost me more money, right? Essentially, like you
Yeah.
said, right? If we're going to say, oh well, it's a premium charge, right? If you want this to be a sustainable delivery, right, or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, and but I think that that's changed, certainly, like where it's been proven out, and obviously it seems like you guys have proven it out that if you are being more sustainable, you're also creating more efficiencies too, which is resulting in a cost savings, right? Or figuring out how to do it at the same price that it would be
Yeah.
otherwise, right?
Yeah. A fundamental principle for us is that we operate as an extension of our merchants team. And your internal team wouldn't charge a premium of their time. Like, oh, like I'm so important, so I'm not going to work 40 hours a week. I'm going to work 20, but you're going to be like
Mm.
really thankful for those 20 hours. Like, it's just not slapping a premium just because it ought to command a premium isn't the way we
Mm.
build our go-to-market strategy. We like think of it very bottoms up. If I'm a founder across the table and I'm trying to reverse engineer GoBolt's unit economics, is this fair? And you're usually at a crossroads between cost, quality, speed. But the X factor is when you have technology introduced, you can sometimes get as much of each of those constraints as possible. So because of our tech, we can give you both a better cost with sustainability, the same speed, and the same quality. And so I think that is how we're trying to break the back on the industry, is like a very practical bottoms up approach. And then
Mm.
how do you introduce tech to make it scalable? And that's why we love the guys at Two Boxes. I mean, we were going on this path of building our own RMA tool, and we're like, they came knocking on the door. This is early days, and we're like, holy shit, this is
Yeah.
great. And I think we like put it in almost every one of our fulfillment warehouses over the next few months. And And then we were like sort of like a design partner and built with them. And Kyle and the team are doing some really incredible things. But it was just so much better because you have this one partner that just like focuses on that, and like we can like delegate that and be good partners with them and for our merchants. So we know where to like lean in and then where to lean out. And
Mm.
just because you lean out of building your own software doesn't mean that you still don't get all the same benefits. And that's where someone like a Two Boxes comes in.
Nice, nice. Yeah, yeah. And I love the kind of just awareness it sounds like you've had in this kind of evolution of the business, right? And seeing like where's the opportunity, where can we really make an impact, where can we, like you said, lean on somebody else to help us accomplish what we're trying to accomplish for our clients. So very interesting. So we, we do have to talk, and I will say to the audience too. We have some comments in here, cheering Mark on. Somebody says that you're the real deal, Mark, and I think we've proven that today through this conversation. But I'm curious. We have to kind of touch on and talk about tariffs here a little bit, right? And some of that uncertainty. I don't think we can have a conversation in the supply chain world without saying the T word
Yeah.
nowadays, right? But
Yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, because as you mentioned, you have locations in Canada, you have locations in the U.S., so definitely it sounds like you have kind of a broad spectrum there of potential clients that would feel some impacts from this. So I guess tell us a little bit about what you're seeing from your perspective, and maybe what you're hearing from some of your clients too, on what they think about this, and I guess maybe what are they trying to do to strategize around this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think over the past month and a half or so, there's been a ton of promotions. Like a ton of brands have just put their product on markdown and have just been
Mm,
plowing money into marketing and sales to liquidate as much inventory, convert it from inventory to cash
mm,
to survive. We've seen all ends of the spectrum, and we have some folks that manufacture even textiles in America and like are unfazed and are just continuing to do their thing. We have some clients who make their stuff exclusively in China. We have some folks who had a distributed supply chain and try to get ahead of it and have some Chinese stuff in storage, but then have some and then like all their net new stuff is made in somewhere like Vietnam.
mm,
And then we've been called to order to create basically country of origin level picking for the same SKU. So we had to very quickly develop a tracing tool to like look at the ASN of the inbound product, trace it back to the country, and then
mm.
essentially make like a lot code type picking strategy where you would do it by country of origin to deplete China first, and then leave sort of like
Oh,
non,
interesting.
more forgiving tariffed countries behind, so that you ideally deplete the most liability heavy product and then keep your less liability heavy product in store. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind. I think brands who are impacted are really scared
Mm,
because it's not often that you have this like a massive oscillation in the market. And you saw that with like the 5 trillion of market cap that got like wiped out from public equities. I think that just highlights the concern and the uncertainty. We're trying our best to help our brands navigate. We've moved a ton of businesses from our Canadian footprint into our US footprint, and vice versa, and set up basically two separate, distinct supply chains. Like previously, we would look at them being like an interplay of each other. So
mm.
Toronto could service the Northeast of North America, and
Yeah.
then LA could service like the Southwest, and then they sort of meet in the middle. Now we just sort of like look at them as like two distinct countries for some merchants. So our software is like set up in a way where we can handle all this, which has been, a blessing. But I think brands are scared, and I think they're trying to figure out what the next path forward is. At the same time, we've seen more demand than ever for our US footprint. Like it's
Mm.
up at an extraordinary amount, like many orders of magnitude than normal for this time of year. And so we're just trying to make sure that we're still having the necessary conversations to qualify each other, set things up for success, and then get things started. Because we obviously have 6 sites in the States and are able to support. But yeah, tons of uncertainty, man. It's a weird time. We feel like we are well positioned to support our brands through it and come up with strategies to mitigate cost, mitigate impact. But yeah, still a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a little wild to try and plan around, right? I mean, I think this morning I think I saw like, we're up to 245% on China or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
It's
just
crazy.
wild to think about, like the additional costs that brands will face like with that. So I mean, so interesting to hear there. And I guess I'm curious too, we talked a little bit about the on the brand side, like what they're doing, but what do you think that means for like the 3PL fulfillment provider space in general?
Well, I think it's going to do a couple things. I think the increased demand might actually be a saving grace for some of those businesses that were on life support already,
Mm,
that didn't really get critical mass in the initial kind of supply chain boom. And I think this is sort of like a second coming to benefit them. So I think like that demand will need to find homes, and there is a finite amount of capacity to like price, contract, onboard, and execute within existing 3PLs. And so you just need more players on the board to support that
mm,
with quality. So I think there's going to be, an kind of sustained increase in demand for now on the U.S. domestic fulfillment front. I think there's going to be a ton of pressure on unit economics. I think brands will be less forgiving for special projects, for not managing returns in an effective way. Like we have a brand that is sitting on 20,000 units of return product
mm.
in LA, and their strategy was that they were going to sell these on the secondary market later. All of a sudden now we're like, okay, special projects, refurb, that's like gold, because like that stuff was
Yeah.
manufactured in China. That's gold. Like, let's get that back into production, back on the shelf and pickable. And so we're doing that for a number of brands as well. And fortunately, with our partnership with Two Boxes and our remediation, like we'll literally take in apparel and like buttons loose, we'll sew it. Something needs to be steamed, we'll sew it. If it's got an odor, we'll put it in an ozone machine and deodorize it. Like there's a ton of things that we do within our returns management system that will help you kind of maintain your inventory investment. And I think that's like the final thing is like brands will start to look at inventory as like a deep investment on the balance sheet, and with a longer term financial consequence of having the wrong inventory on hand, and then not managing the inventory that you do have properly, which includes outbound and returns. So lots lifting and shifting, but I think those are some of the kind of short term and midterm impacts I see.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, interesting to hear from both perspectives there, and yeah, if anybody in the audience is listening, want to chime in so with some of their thoughts on tariffs, feel free to leave that in the comments there. But I think that it's super interesting to hear kind of the strategy there, like really interesting to hear that returns perspective too. That we had these 20,000 units, as you said, and we were gonna just sell them on secondary market. Now, all of a sudden, like that inventory is worth so much more, right? So, really interesting there. I mean, do you see that? Because obviously, one of the messages behind these tariffs, right, is the idea that they want to push manufacturing back into the United States, right? I mean, do you see that brands that you're working with, are they exploring that? Are they even seeing that as like a viable option in some cases?
Uh, Honestly, I think not a single one has mentioned that that is a potential outcome for them.
Really
Partly because I
interesting.
think it is so foreign as a concept.
Mm,
And like if you wanted to go make sneakers in the US, who'd you go to? Like
yeah.
I can't think of a scaled manufacturer that would build white label sneakers.
Mm,
Um, you go on Alibaba, you'll find 1,000 of them. And so I think that that's a problem. And it goes to the heart of the concern, right? It's that this is a massive, like, drop of a dime thing where you are changing like international trade and supply chain setups that typically like take decades to unravel and shift.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
you're trying to do it immediately. And I understand like the administration's desire to do that. I think their goal is to do it for more critical material like semiconductors, batteries, vehicles, et cetera, like things that like were the backbone of the US or will become the backbone of the US moving forward.
Mm,
Um, I don't think where your favorite leather white sneakers are made is critically important. And I think that that's starting to be unraveled now. But nevertheless, like when you're trying to make massive change, like you're going to break some things. And being a
Yeah.
startup, I can appreciate that. Like, you move fast, you break things.
Yeah.
The government is not often the thing that you think about being startup like, and it's kind of like interesting. You can't really suck and blow at the same time.
Mm.
At the same, people want like the government to move faster and like get things done. And when they attempt to do that, we have a lot of criticism, and maybe fairly so, because this is like highly disruptive. But I think there's a vision, and there's a vision that's being pursued. How it plays out will be interesting, and your guess will be as good as mine on what happens next.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve, and how it does shift. Because I mean, certainly for us in the supply chain, right? I mean, it's definitely going to have. There's going to be. It's not going to be the same, right?
Yeah,
In one
yeah,
way or another, right? And I think it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of shakes out. And I think it is. It's like a long term, like how does this really evolve over the next few years, right? And play out. But yeah, I mean, certainly right now, all these negotiations and things are going on. Like, there's so much uncertainty, right? Of where does it actually land, right? And where does it actually end up and get solidified, at least for a decent amount of time, right? So very interesting stuff here with you, Mark, and really appreciate you coming on this morning and being live with us here on the New Warehouse podcast. Great to learn about the GoBolt journey that you've been on and are continuing on as well, and really interesting to hear how the business started and the evolution of that, and what you're seeing in the market now, and also your thoughts on kind of what's going on right now. It's great to get those perspectives, because I think a lot of people are wondering what other people are doing, what are other people seeing, and trying to figure it out themselves. So really appreciate you sharing that with us. So if people want to get in touch or learn more about GoBolt, what's the best way to do that?
yeah. Probably LinkedIn InMail is probably the easiest thing. My email is also mark@gobolt.com, and I'm happy to kind of take some and get back to folks with some thoughts, or if any helpful comments I can provide. So LinkedIn or email, whichever suits your fancy.
There you go. Well, we got a lot of people listening, right, and watching right now on LinkedIn. So just go connect with Mark right now while you're on the platform. So, Mark, really appreciate you tuning in, and thank you for everybody. I don't know, wherever you are, at home or in the office, wherever it might be this morning, for tuning in and giving Mark an audience here. And if you tuned in late to this, you'll be able to watch the replay right on the platform that you're watching now in a couple minutes, or we will put the audio version up on the New Warehouse podcast feed within the next week as well. So make sure you are subscribed to the podcast. And for everything The New Warehouse, go to thenewwarehouse.com. So, Mark, thank you once again for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Appreciate it.